to be about a goal of saying everybody should end up in the same place. And since we didn't start in the same place, some folks might need more. Equitable distribution. Giving resources based on equity, understanding that we fight for equality, but we also need to fight for equity, understanding not everyone starts out at the same place. So there's a big difference between equality and equity. Equality suggests often everybody should get the same thing. Well, that often assumes everybody started out in the same place, as opposed to equity, which is everyone should end up in the same place. And if you then understand not everybody started out in the same place, you understand some people need more. So we all end up in the same place, right? We are proud of the fact that equity is one of our guiding principles. Proud of the fact that we understand equality is important, but not everybody starts out on the same base. We see that people in our country are having an experience that is not equal. So when we talk about the work we are doing here together, it is recognizing that and being guided by this principle of what we must do in the spirit and in the interest of equity. To put equity firmly at the center of our economic policy. But no, if you look at the reality of who will benefit from certain policies, when you take into account that they're not starting at the same place and they're not starting on equal footing, it will directly benefit Black children, Black families, Black homeowners.
So by default, it affects Black families, but there's not a particular policy for African Americans that you would explore.
But no, if you look at the reality of who will benefit from certain policies, when you take into account that they're not starting at the same place and they're not starting on equal footing, it will directly benefit Black children, Black families, Black homeowners, because the disparities are so significant. So if we focus on the specific issues that have resulted in the greatest disparities, and we understand that that's part of why we're doing it. Listen, the reality also is this: any policy that will benefit Black people will benefit all of society. Let's be clear about that. Let's really be clear about that. So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit Black people. No. Because whatever benefits that Black family will benefit that community and society as a whole and the country. Right?
On January 20th, 2021, if you are president, what specifically would you do with the thousands of people who try to reach the United States every day and want a better life through asylum?
Immediately on January 20th of 2021, I will, first of all, we cannot forget our DACA recipients, and so I'm going to start there. I will immediately, by executive action, reinstate DACA status and DACA protection to those young people. I will further extend protection for deferral of deportation for their parents and for veterans who we have so many who are undocumented and have served our country and fought for our democracy. I will also immediately put in place a meaningful process for reviewing the cases for asylum. I will release children from cages. I will get rid of the private detention centers. And I will ensure that this microphone that the President of the United States holds in her hand is used in a way that is about reflecting the values of our country.
Produced by Dane Calloway and Tanisha Calloway. Watch this brand new documentary, Mother Rosa, right now at DaneMakeYouThink.com.
Some people believe certain politicians are part of a shadow government or deep state, also known as the administrative state. This group consists of unelected officials who hold positions of power and control the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government. There are weighty allegations that certain politicians are affiliated with the CCP, also known as the Chinese Communist Party. This party, which has been the sole ruling party of the Republic of China since 1921, is believed to be influencing political power within Western European governments, including the United States government. The CCP's alleged aim to rival the United States could potentially threaten the so-called democracy of the United States government with the swipe of a pen, a situation that the public needs to be fully informed and aware of.
I learned, I think I was, 22 when I started that work. I learned that with the swipe of my pen, I could charge someone with the lowest level offense. And because of the swipe of my pen, that person could be arrested. They could sit in jail for at least 48 hours. They could lose time from work and their family maybe lose their job. They'd have to come out of their own pocket to help hire a lawyer. They'd lose standing in their community. All because of the swipe of my pen. Weeks later, I could dismiss the charges, but their life would forever be changed. So I learned at a very young age the power.
Like many others in her circle, Kamala Harris has been accused of being a puppet of the CCP. These accusations are based on her previous policies as Attorney General and Senator of California, and the policy she presented during her last presidential campaign. She initially stated her agenda before being forced to run for president again, less than 2 months ago. And she also did not do anything in favor of U.S. citizens during her tenure as vice president currently. However, she allowed millions of foreign immigrants to cross the United States borders illegally, being as though Joe Biden entrusted her with controlling the borders.
And I can think of nobody who's better qualified to do this than this is a woman who ran the second largest Attorney General's office in America after the United States Attorney General in the state of California, and has done a great deal upholding human rights, but also fighting organized crime in the process. So it's not her full responsibility and job, but she's leading the effort, because I think the best thing to do is to put someone who, when he or she speaks, they don't have to wonder about, is that where the president is? When she speaks for me, doesn't have to check with me, she knows what she's doing, and I hope we can move this along. So, Madam Vice President, thank you. I gave you a tough job, and you're smiling, but there's no one better capable of trying to organize this.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, and for having the confidence in me. And there's no question that this is a challenging situation. As the President has said, there are many factors that lead President to leave these countries. And
tonight, Vice President Kamala Harris has an important new job, leading the administration's effort to stem the surge of migrants crossing the southern border. So many are coming in. So many are coming in. So many are coming in. So many are coming in.
With her accumulating $81 million in donations through Act Blue within 24 hours of announcing that she was running for president, many voters became increasingly skeptical of her intentions. The fact that she was never officially voted in to replace Joe Biden as the Democratic presidential candidate has raised serious questions. People are now assuming that some more enormous force is behind her, and this skepticism is a sign of the public's growing caution and critical thinking. During her last presidential bid in 2020, she received less than the majority of votes and could not afford to continue, forcing her to withdraw from the race.
She launched her campaign with more than 20,000 supporters in Oakland, a rising Democratic star.
Let's do this!
Kamala Harris, the telegenic California senator and former state attorney general, rocketing to the top tier of a crowded field by taking on Joe Biden in the first debate.
There was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools, and she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
Do you feel that you've toppled the frontrunner?
I don't know. I'll leave that to the pundits.
But a month later, stumbling over the cost of her health care plan.
You can't beat President Trump with double talk on this plan.
By mid-October, she was behind in the money race and failing to connect to African Americans, polling only 5% with black voters recently compared to 43% for Biden. And failing to connect to African Americans, polling only 5% with black voters recently compared to 43% for Biden. By the last debate, vying for attention.
I have more people supporting me in the black community. The only African American woman that ever been elected to the United States Senate.
No,
my point is
that's not true. The other one is here.
Tonight, praise from the other Democrats.
She is a first-rate intellect, a first-rate candidate, and it's a real competitor.
Sometimes campaigns have a way of tearing people apart or breaking down friendships. For us, it's brought us closer.
Andrea joins us now. Andrea, it's worth noting that Harris dropped out today, but not before issuing a parting shot about who's left.
Indeed. She said in the end she could not compete with two billionaires last year. Two billionaires now in the race, Tom Steyer and Mike Bloomberg. They have unlimited campaign money.
So many voters are asking where all of this money and support is coming from when just 4 years ago, she was a laughingstock because she couldn't afford to persuade the public's opinion in her favor, politically, economically, and verbally. Wait a minute. Did she just claim that she's an African American?
By the last debate, vying for attention.
I have more people supporting me in the black community. The only African American woman that ever been elected to the United States Senate.
No,
my point is
that's not true. The other one is here. No,
my point is
that's not true. The other one is here. No,
my point is
that's not true. The other one is here.
Wow, she sure did. And only the so-called blacks of California knew of her. They know her well, especially her crooked policies, where she continued the corruption within the justice system.
What's your response?
I want to bring the conversation back to the broken criminal justice system that is disproportionately negatively impacting black and brown people all across this country today. Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Senator Harris, your response?
As the elected Attorney General of California, I did the work of significantly reforming the criminal justice system of a state of 40 million people, which became a national model for the work that needs to be done. And I am proud of that work. And I am proud of making a decision to not just give fancy speeches or be in a legislative body and give speeches on the floor, but actually doing the work of being in the position to use the power that I had to reform a system that is badly in need of reform. That is why we created initiatives that were about reentering former offenders and getting them counseling. It is why, and because I know that criminal justice system is so broken, that I am an advocate for what we need to do to not only decriminalize, but legalize marijuana in the United States.
I want to bring Congresswoman Gabbard back in. Your response,
The bottom line is, Senator Harris, when you are in a position to make a difference and an impact in these people's lives, you did not. And worse yet, in the case of those who are on death row, innocent people, you actually blocked evidence from being revealed that would have freed them until you were forced to do so. There is no excuse for that. And the people who suffered under your reign as prosecutor, you owe them an apology.
Senator Harris.
My entire career, I have been personally opposed to the death penalty, and that has never changed. And I dare anybody who is in a position to make that decision, to face the people I have faced, to say, I will not seek the death penalty. That is my background. That is my work. I am proud of it. I think you can judge people by when they are under fire, and it's not about some fancy opinion on a stage, but when they're in the position to actually make a decision, what do they do? When I was in the position of having to decide whether or not to seek a death penalty on cases I prosecuted, I made a very difficult decision that was not popular to not seek the death penalty. History shows that, and I am proud of those decisions.
Senator Harris said she was proud of her record as a prosecutor. The few examples that I mentioned, I'm shocked. I'm shocked that she would be proud of throwing people in jail for marijuana violations, for minor marijuana violations. And then when she was asked about, oh, have you ever smoked marijuana, she laughed. She's ruined people's lives because of these decisions she's made. She refused to bring evidence, to allow evidence to come forward that would take an innocent person off of death row. How can you be proud of that? She talks a lot about being a prosecutor president. This is not the kind of prosecutor that I would want leading our country. The fact is, when she was in a position to make change, she not only chose not to do so, she actually further harmed people in their lives. The fact that under her leadership, they kept people in prison longer than their terms of sentence, purely because they wanted cheap slave labor. Think about how terrible that is, the lives that were impacted, the families that were left behind, the children who were left behind, even after someone served their time. It's absolutely unacceptable, and she needs to be held accountable for her record.
How did she suddenly gain the vote of Black Americans? As of today, she has garnered $500 million in 1 month. And what's alarming is that she collected all of these donations without even mentioning any of the policies she'll implement as President of the United States. Until a few days ago, no one knew about her policies. However, people still supported her. They were influenced by her association with celebrities, hoping to gain credibility by winning over their fans. She also relied heavily on identity politics, claiming she is Black despite her birth record stating she's white. Additionally, her position as vice president led people to trust her somehow with 4 more years of holding the keys to the country. I want you to notice that no one on social media is bragging about her policies, which she mentioned a few days ago. Here's why.
But right before the Democrats' big day, Kamala made the biggest mistake of her campaign. She told us what her plans were. Kamala wants to control the price of food.
I will work to pass the first ever federal ban on price gauging on food. My plan will include new penalties for opportunistic companies that exploit crises and break the rules.
Princess Kamala wasn't supposed to have plans, or whatever those plans were. She was supposed to hide them until after the election. But now she wants to pick the price of bacon? Kamala knows what a head of lettuce should cost, even though she hasn't been in a grocery store in 4 years. The princess just waves her magic wand and poof, a loaf of bread's $2.50. Why didn't anyone else think of that? Well, a lot of people did, and it's been a disaster every time. 2,000 years ago, Roman Emperor Diocletian put in a price control, punishable by death. Prices went up, and merchants started selling goods on the black market. The Soviets tried it too. That ended in bread lines. Even President Nixon gave it a shot.
The time has come for decisive action, action that will break the vicious circle of spiraling prices and costs. I am today ordering a freeze on all prices and wages throughout the United States for a period of 90 days.
Nixon's price freeze triggered shortages and even more inflation. And then 90 days later, he got rid of them. In Venezuela, Hugo Chavez went on a socialist spending spree, which sent food prices skyrocketing, so he had the same idea as Harris. and capped food prices. And Venezuela went from one of the richest countries in the world to one of the poorest. Price controls aren't a new idea. They're just a bad one.
It is a device that governments have repeatedly resorted to try to cover up the effects of their own policies. It is offered as a cure for inflation. It is not a cure for inflation. It has never been a cure for inflation. It is an alleged cure that is far worse than the disease.
The government setting food prices didn't work for Rome, the Soviets, Nixon, or Venezuela. But Kamala thinks she can just wave her magic wand and voila, capitalism disappears. This was her campaign's first opportunity to show us her economic vision, and it turns out she's blind as a bat. We all waited a month to hear what Kamala believed in, and she finally told us it's communism. The princess doesn't understand basic math. She thinks supply and demand means when she demands something, the intern supplies it. Kamala's communism would have come out in a primary. And for those Democrats watching, a primary is when politicians compete with each other and do interviews, take questions from voters, and tell us what they believe in. But why bother with democracy when coronating a mysterious princess makes it easier on the Democrats and much easier for her? Kamala can wave her magic wand and build millions of new homes across America.
By the end of my first term, we will end America's housing shortage by building 3 million new homes and rentals that are affordable for the middle class. In addition, while we work on the housing shortage, my administration will provide first-time home buyers with $25,000 to help with the down payment on a new home.
Kamala spent $8 billion and she built 7 charging stations. You think she can build 3 million homes? The guy she's running against builds things for a living. If you want a new home, I'd vote for that guy. And she's going to hand anybody who wants to build their first house a check for $25,000. Do you hear that sound? If you listen closely, that's the sound of every home seller raising their listing price by 25 grand. This just drives home prices up more. Just like electric cars or college tuition, when the government subsidizes, the price goes up and the country goes deeper in debt. Kamala doesn't care. She's got a wand and a dream, and she's going to wave it until her wrist gives out. She wants to get rid of private health insurance. Poof. And pick the price of drugs. If Big Pharma says that's illegal, she'll make their patents go poof.
For any drug where they fail to play by our rules, I will snatch their patent so that we will take over. And yes, we can do that. Yes, we can do that. Yes, we can do that.
And Kamala says that if men and women are paid differently, you're getting fined.
For every 1% differential between what they are paying men and women for equal work, there will be a fine of 1% of their previous year's profits. That'll get their attention.
Fines, price controls, snatching patents. $25,000 handouts for a couple who just graduated from Harvard and want to scoop up their first starter home in Nantucket. This isn't what the machine coronated Kamala for. They wanted a figurehead who would hide in her castle, not share her Marxist ideas with voters. The machine can drag this princess across the finish line if she just keeps her mouth shut. Naughty little princess.
We've seen it happen in Venezuela. We've seen it happen in the Soviet Union. Price controls just don't work. It expresses a level of economic illiteracy.
We've seen this kind of thing tried in lots of other countries before. Venezuela, Argentina, the Soviet Union, et cetera. It leads to shortages. It leads to black markets. plenty of uncertainty.
It sounded a lot like this notion that we were going to set price controls and that we were returning to the 1970s. You can't pay more than, let's say, $2.50 for milk. And if you do, we're going to charge the grocery store with some criminal act. And obviously this hasn't worked, these sorts of policies in Venezuela or Soviet Russia.
Kamala is supposed to be the puppet princess. And now the media is freaking out because she's telling everybody she's a commie. Obama's economic guru tells the New York Times this isn't a sensible policy. Washington Post calls it a gimmick. The Atlantic calls her plan economically dumb. USA Today says, don't fall for it. Charles Gasparino reports Wall Street is working overtime this weekend, warning clients that Kamala is clueless about business. She was supposed to be the corporate America candidate. Lobbyists would be telling her what to do. She's not supposed to have any ideas of her own, or at least she's not supposed to be sharing them. And now she's promising breadlines and free houses? Those donations are going to dry up if she keeps telling voters what's going on in that little head of hers. No more policy from the princess unless it's approved by the media and donors. They were the ones who whacked Biden, and they can whack you too, princess, if you talk without their permission. Kamala will probably get out of this by doing what she's done her whole career. Did I say price control? I don't believe in that anymore. Kamala's already in the White House. She could do everything she's campaigning on today. So why isn't she?
I'm just here to make you think. Slow down. Yeah. Sub up, like up.